Which one? Mother and father and daughter and son. We gonna learn and plus have fun. Yes indeed, the time has come. Reach out to your neighbor, do something nice, return the favor. It's all good, we all get along. Clap your hands and sing along to the song. Young people, you ain't gotta do wrong. We can all do right, come on.
Hi, I'm Julie Hyman. I own Julie Hyman PC, a firm specializing in matrimonial, trials, and appellate work. I represent people going through acrimonious divorce as well as order of protection issues and support issues in the family court system. One of the things that many times happens in a lot of my cases is a parent is concerned for their safety. There's concern that there's going to be a divorce, there's stuff that's going on back and forth between the parties, there may be pushing or shoving, there may be harassment, or whatever the level might be, and I have a client comes to me and says, you know, I am concerned for my safety and I don't know what to do. And what I have always recommended to them is that if there is an incident that rises in their gut to the need for an order of protection, that they should, if they're actually the incidents taking place, that they should call the police and file an incident report, or if they haven't called the police and the incident has gone down, to go and make a police report to document the incident, and then to go to the family court and file for what's called a family offense petition and see a judge. And once they do that, the judge can issue what's called a temporary order of protection. And that could have different forms. Some are just that the other spouse can't harass or commit a family offense against the other parent or spouse, or a stay away, which can include everything from stay away from the home, stay away from their place of employment, stay away from the children's school. And some of these order of protections do include the children on them, and some of them are without, depending on the circumstances of the case. When they do get a temporary order of protection, what ends up happening is, if it's an exclusion order of protection, one of the parents is asked basically to leave the premises, and they have to find other housing during the pendency of the case, or until a court has a hearing on the issue and makes a determination that the case either has merit or does not have merit, and that the order of protection should be a final order. But in many of the matrimonial cases that I have, and family court cases, the main concern of the court system and of a judge is for the safety of the victim. And so for many of my cases, the temporary orders of protections are grand. It gives the person who's going through that experience some sense that they are safe. If somebody violates the order of protection, such as shows up at the residence, is seen stalking around the premises, shows up at the children's school, or shows up at their place of employment, they can call the cops, and it's a mandatory arrest. And in some of my cases, parents and spouses really do have to do. So now sometimes it may start with a temporary order of protection, and now all of a sudden the divorce action needs to be commenced, or one party is now out of the home and the other party starts the divorce action. And now what happens? Well, the divorce court, the Supreme Court, has the power to hear all of the matrimonial issues. So anything from divorce to custody to visitation to maintenance to child support to equitable distribution and counsel fees can all be heard by one court, including the order of protection issue. So many times in the beginning of a case, if a divorce action's been filed, there's a preference for the order of protection from family court to be brought into and consolidated in the Supreme Court proceeding. So that during that process, the temporary order would be extended and can continue to be extended by the Supreme Court judge while the case is being adjudicated. Sometimes I'll tell a client, you know, the fastest way to get an order of protection is to go into the family court and get to a petition clerk and have them help assist with preparing the petition, take you in front of the judge, ask for the temporary order to be issued, and then to have it served. And where we left off was that, you know, there's a protection knowing that if there's a temporary order of protection or order of protection, if there's a violation and somebody shows up at your residence or shows up at your place of work or shows up at the children's school, that they can be arrested and brought back for a violation. Without having to actually go through the process of filing in court. Now, sometimes people have certain positions. They might be in law enforcement. There's a whole variety of reasons why somebody might be very concerned about having an order of protection or a temporary order of protection against them, and a court might be a little concerned that it could affect their employment, but still wants to protect the safety of the family. So we also have mutual civil restraining orders that can be issued where people can agree to not commit a family offense against the other person, or agree to not to give one party exclusive occupancy of the marital home. On those cases, if there's a violation, you don't have the protection of calling the cops and them being automatically arrested. They would have to file in court and ask permission of the judge to have that person found in violation of contempt of the civil restraining order. So it's not as strong a protection, but there are protections. Once the case is resolved, many times a lot of the stress and the fear of the abuse comes to an end.
When it comes to victims of domestic violence is, why don't they leave? We try at Sanctuary for Families not to put the focus in a victim-blaming way on why they don't leave, and actually try to focus on breaking down some of those barriers to leaving an abusive relationship that we know exist. One of those barriers, of course, is housing. If the person who's abusing you is living in your home, perhaps you're married to the person, you're living with the person is related to you, it's very, very challenging in New York City, for example, in Westchester County, where housing is not very cheap, to go out on your own and find yourself housing. So what do? Well, we have in New York State a domestic violence shelter system, which is not what you would think of in terms of the shelters that you might have seen on TV, where it's a bunch of beds in the basement of a church or in a gym. These domestic violence shelters are often buildings with a number of different apartments, and victims can access those by calling the shelter hotline, 1-800-621-HOPE, H-O-P. And the domestic violence shelters are confidential addresses. So they, nor anyone else who lives at the shelter or works at the shelter, will reveal that address publicly, so that that can be a place of safety. And the shelters employ safety staff, as well as counseling staff, case management, and other needs to assist victims. The ways that we try to tackle that problem is by economic empowerment. We need to help our clients to be able to support themselves after leaving an abusive relationship. As was mentioned, many of them work, although work is something that is a challenge when you're a victim of domestic violence, because often abusers will interfere with their jobs. They may stalk them at the workplace. They may call their boss to try to embarrass them or get them in trouble. It can be a way for them to punish them. In addition, a lot of victims of domestic violence lose lots of time at work due to injuries that they suffer from the domestic violence, or trying to hide their injuries from their co-workers by staying home until, for example, a bruise fades. So we also see some challenges with our domestic violence victim clients in being able to maintain a good job for a long period of time while they're in an abusive relationship. So many of them don't necessarily have a big track record of working. And many abusers will not want their victims to work, because working would give them access to money to be able to go out on their own, would give them access to other people who might be a source of assistance, who might find out what's going on. It's part of the isolation to keep them out of the workforce in some cases. So one of the things that we are really looking at with our clients is how are they going to survive economically? And so we have an economic empowerment program that does a career readiness workshop as well as a computer operating systems workshop, which the victims that go into this program graduate from with a certification, and they're able to go on to get employment. And we have a very, very good success rate of getting employment for our clients who graduate from the program, and a very high percentage of our clients who enter the program actually complete it and graduate. So that is something that we're very, very proud of, and it's something that we have expanded significantly. We have workshops that have focused on young men as well as younger children. A very important component is being able to access support from the other parent of that child. So among the legal services that we look at how to obtain child support and spousal support for our domestic violence survivors from abusive partners who are frequently unwilling and very, very reluctant to pay anything to their victim, because they know that if their victim has that money to be able to live on her own with the children, that she's not going to be so easy to pull back in. If she has to decide between a life of poverty with her children and a life of violence, sometimes she's going to choose a life of violence because she doesn't want to see her children starve. And that's a reality. And so what we try to do is set up systems where victims will not be caught in that cycle, in that terrible choice of, do I endure a life of violence and being controlled by someone and made to feel like I'm less than human, or do I have to see my children suffering and starving and living perhaps in a dangerous neighborhood because I am not getting any support and I don't have the means to be able to support my children on my own. So we have been trying to make that choice no longer the only option. And in order to do so, we have a wide range of legal services that we provide to our clients. One of the first things we often do with clients who are seeking legal support is we consider whether they might be eligible for an order of protection. Now, an order of protection can come in a couple of different ways. It can come through a criminal court proceeding where the abuser is arrested and prosecuted, and during the course of that prosecution, and then if they either plead guilty or are convicted, the victim will get an order of protection. Orders of protection can have a lot of different types of provisions. Some of the provisions are simply ordering the person not to commit any crime against this person, believe it or not. Some of them are an actual stay-away order. You can't come near this person. You can't contact this person. You can't call them. You can't go to their home. You can't go to their place of business or their school. And some of them, if the parties are living together, actually exclude the abuser from the home. In other words, that abuser has to move out for the time period that that order of protection is in place. Those can sometimes be challenging to get because you really have to show that the victim is in danger of suffering ongoing abuse in order to have the court be willing to take someone out of their home, take the abuser out of the home. So the first thing we look at is orders of protection. Not everyone necessarily, however, wants to see their abuser arrested. Not every case do the police necessarily arrest unless there is some evidence of a higher level misdemeanor. If it's what could be considered a violation, then an arrest won't necessarily happen. If it's not reported to the police, obviously an arrest generally is not going to happen. So another avenue for a victim to obtain an order of protection is to get a civil order of protection, and the place that mostly they go for that is family court, although it can be done in Supreme Court in the context of a divorce action. So in the family court system, orders of protection can be issued on the basis of the victim going in, filing a petition, and the petition has to allege that a family offense occurred. Family offenses are a whole list of different forms of abuse that most recently last year added some forms of economic abuse. A few years before that added sexual abuse to the prior enumerated family offenses of physical abuse that we've had in place for quite some time. And if they allege that those forms of abuse that rise to the level of one of those family offenses occurred, they can obtain an order of protection from the court. That case will be litigated. The abuser will have an opportunity to come in and either consent to the order of protection with no admission of wrongdoing, and that order will be in place to protect the victim, or to contest that order of protection and to have a trial, at which time it's very important for victims to have representation by an attorney in order to be able to prove their case. And that's one of the services that we provide at Sanctuary for Families. Sanctuary for Families piloted a program in 1997 called the Courtroom Advocates Project. This is a program that actually assists victims from the beginning of their cases when they're filing their petitions in family court, and we still run the program to this day. It's actually how I started to come to this work. In 1998, I did a training for the Courtroom Advocates program as a first-year law student at NYU Law School, and I learned about domestic violence. I learned about our family court system, and I had a chance to go into court and actually assist victims who were petitioning for orders of protection. I helped them draft their petitions. I stood by their side while they went in front of a judge for the first time. I made sure they understood how to serve the abuser with the order of protection, how to use the police if there was a violation of the order of protection, and then was with them when they came back to court in the early stages of the case, where the vast majority of victims go into court without an attorney. So it gave a service to them that they otherwise would not have had, and sort of held their hand through the first part of the process. So we are actually working with most of the area law schools in the New York City area to continue this program, and basically what we do is use the services, the volunteer services of law students to go into the family courts and assist those victims up until the point when a case is being litigated and the person obtains an attorney. So it's a very, very helpful service. They can go in and not be alone in the first days. One of the ways they can find out whether we have courtroom advocates at a particular petition room at a particular family court is to call us at Sanctuary for Families. We have a legal helpline at 212-349-6009, and the extension for our family law legal helpline is 246. If they call and leave a message, they'll have their call returned. They can talk about their situation. We can assess their legal needs. And if one of those legal needs is to go in and get an order of protection, we can actually let them know which day we'll have advocates at the courthouse who could assist them with filing their case. So that's a really important first intervention that we can be there to make. In terms of future needs, frequently, and this is another reason why victims might be reluctant to leave their abuser, frequently they have children together. And if they have children together, believe it or not, victims are at risk of losing custody of their children. And that may be a big fear that they have that causes them to stay with their abuser, because the abusers often tell them, if you take me to court, I will make sure that I get custody of the children and that you never see the children again. That is a major threat that is the scariest thing to a victim with children. Any parent who is facing the possibility of being separated from their children, that's going to be one of their biggest fears. So often they have a custody case that comes about as soon as they file for an order of protection. It's something that we see very, very frequently. So we assess sort of what they're going to face, and we let them know what to expect out of the process before they walk into the court for the first time, if we can get to them at that stage. Sometimes they come to us when they already have a case pending, and then we can hopefully assist them through that case in order to ensure that they continue to have access to their children, that they are able to make decisions on behalf of their children and have their children hopefully with them as much time as possible, whether it's as a primary physical custodial parent or in other cases if they're having visitation, parenting time with their child, if the child is living with the other parent, as sometimes happens in these cases, because it's not infrequent that children align with the abusive parent. And I don't know if some of my colleagues would like to talk a little bit about
some
that
of them,
issue.
and I think overall everything that Amanda has spoken about is basically services for adult victims of domestic parents who are partners and parents of abusive partners. This when we're talking back to teen dating violence, we're talking a whole different set of circumstances. For example, prior to 2008, with the passage of Fair Access to Family Court Act, we teen dating violence victims and other domestic violence victims could not access family court for orders of protection. Prior to 2008, you could only access family court for an order of protection if you were married, formerly married, or had a child in common. This basically throws out teen dating violence victims, LGBT victims who could not be legally married to each other, It throws out pregnant women, pregnant victims of domestic violence because the child in common was not a child yet. They didn't count in utero, and I believe they also throws out basically victims of domestic violence who were not married, who were just dating, or who were so Fair Access actually eliminated a lot of these barriers to this, but then it is still a very complicated matter to have a teen dating. For example, domestic violence shelters, most of them are almost all 18.
I think it's also important to mention the particular needs of immigrant victims of domestic violence. We have a very significant immigrant population in the greater New York City metropolitan area. We have people who have immigrated here from all around the world. One of the major ways that abusers are able to try to control victims who are immigrants is to tell them, if you leave me, I will make sure you are deported. And these threats are very credible in the general climate that the immigrant victim is seeing around them and where they're living. Because we have, for example, laws where if you are an immigrant who is arrested for a crime, the NYPD or the Department of Corrections will work together with the immigration authorities to advise them, and we have this person who is an undocumented immigrant in our custody, and they may end up in an immigrant detention center before they're even found to either be guilty or not guilty of any kind of a crime. So that is a real fear for immigrant victims. Their abusers utilize that fear in order to keep control over them. And our immigration department serves thousands of immigrant victims of domestic violence every year. The good news is that there are many different remedies that immigrant victims of domestic violence can access under the law. The Violence Against Women Act provides a lot of opportunities for immigrant victims who are married to someone who is a citizen or a green card holder, for them to obtain status without the help of their abuser. And for crime victims who are undocumented, they can obtain some visas to stay in this country and eventually have a path to get a green card if they are cooperating with law enforcement in the investigation or prosecution of a crime. Also for juveniles, there is special immigrant juvenile status, which many of our attorneys are working on for our younger victims who are immigrants, in order to give them a pathway to obtain immigration status. So Sanctuary for Families has a mission of ending domestic violence. It's not done just by providing services after the fact to victims and their children, although that's a big part of what we do. Preventive services are very important. Community outreach and education is very important, and systems change advocacy to make sure that our legal and social systems are changed to optimally assist victims and prevent future domestic violence are very important components of what we do. We feel that the work that we do for direct services to clients as well as the work we do in terms of advocacy work hand in hand. It's very important for our mission for us to be able to do that. For our victims, the advocacy that we're doing to change systems can help in the long term victims to have better access to the services that they need. Conversely, what we do with our victims informs our advocacy to make sure that the policies that we're asking our government to put in place are going to have the right outcome for our victims. And it also gives us a level of credibility when we're advocating for systems change, that we know from the experiences of our clients how the way the laws and the systems are working now is actually affecting individuals in our society. So we do both of those things. In order to do those things, we need a fairly complex system of funding. So our organization is funded by a combination of different types of funding sources. We have some government grants, we have foundation grants, we have private donors, we have companies, corporations that donate as well. We have large fundraising events that occur as well as small donations. Some of our former clients who feel grateful for the work that we've done might give a check to Sanctuary for Families, or someone that we meet at an event or reach out to through the media or through our outreach and education services might send us a donation. And that donation can be used both for victim services and for community outreach and education and for the systems change public policy advocacy that we do.
Teach one, mother and father and daughter and son. We gonna learn and plus have fun. Yes indeed, the time has come. Reach out to your neighbor, do something nice, return the favor. It's all good, we all get along. Clap your hands and sing along to the song. Young people, you ain't gotta do wrong. We can all do right, come on.